Welcome to the ProClimber podcast. In this episode, I speak to Bob Burnett. Bob is an award-winning architectural designer based in Christchurch who champions environmental and energy-efficient design. Bob designed New Zealand's first 7 and 10 Homestar rated homes. In this episode, we talk about his role in the Christchurch Earthquake rebuild and how this led to the formation of the Superhome Movement.
ProClimber inspires and educates people to create healthy, durable and energy-efficient buildings to live, learn, work and play in. Well, welcome to the ProClimber podcast, Bob. How are you doing today?
Really good, thanks.
Fantastic. Now, Bob, maybe if you can just give our audience a little bit of a perspective. Which part of New Zealand did you grow up in?
I'm Christchurch, born and bred, Otautahi, Christchurch.
Fantastic. And when you were growing up, did you know from a young age that you wanted to study architectural design?
Probably, yeah. I think I was always interested in doing something creative and quite good at art and at school, but also good at maths and science. I think I applied to do a visual communications course in commercial art, but the second choice was architectural design, and in Christchurch it was the CPIT back then, which is now ARA. So that's what I did, and did the architectural design course.
Fantastic. And then once you were finished that, what was your first job like?
I went to work for a firm called Collins Architects, which is probably one of the oldest in the city and probably the most history. So they still had plans on linen, coloured plans, almost like paintings. Had done some very old buildings like the press building in the square and that sort of thing. So that was interesting. And I think when I was applying for a job, I just took a roll of my drawings and went around all the architecture offices, and it was quite an unfortunate time because it was in the middle of a building boom just before the crash. These things go in cycles, and it was sort of at the peak of the building boom. And I had 5 different firms to choose from.
Wow, that was a good position to be in.
Yeah.
How did you make your choice as to which one to join?
Oh, just the one where I thought I liked the people and liked the work that they'd been doing.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I ended up sort of working for a few different firms, and the last firm I worked for was Warren & Marnie Architects before I went to do my own work and set up my own business.
And I see you did a stint at the Polytech tutoring as well. How do you enjoy that?
Yeah, so I did a couple of years full-time after leaving Warren & Marnie, and then did part-time tutoring after that. But it was quite spooky, actually, because the tutors that were still there when I became a tutor were my tutors when I was a student. Yeah, one of them said, "I remember you. I kicked you out of my class."
Interesting. That's a good one.
It's probably been too noisy.
Yeah. And Bob, how did you find once you'd stepped out on your own? What was it like starting your own business in the Christchurch area and trying to get clients and things like that?
Probably one of the first projects we did was me and my wife, Shizuka. She's a Japanese architect. We did our own home, and people saw that, and sort of off the back of that, we got a lot of hill homes and a handful in the area where we built our own home. Yeah, so we're focusing almost entirely on residential and mainly on the hills, Port Hills of Christchurch. But that's what Shizuka was interested in, residential architecture. It's what she'd been doing in Japan before she came to New Zealand. Before that, I was quite a sort of ambitious young guy, and I was doing some big projects, some hotels and shopping centres and things like that. But after teaming up with Shizuka, it's been mainly residential and pretty much sustainable, energy efficient, almost entirely from the very beginning, actually. So we were kind of pioneering in that, and people probably thought we were strange. But yeah, it's become a lot more trendy these days.
Things are really changing, aren't they? Now, what would you recommend to people that are wanting to build a home, how they should actually go about choosing the right architect for them?
It's a good question. I think there's a lot of things to think about. A lot of the time people will take a recommendation from a friend, a referral, but I think there's a lot of things to consider. do you click with them? Do you get on with them? Can you talk to them about anything? Because you're going to be working with them maybe for a year or two if it's a significant project. So you need to get along, and you need to be able to be open and discuss everything, including sticky things like budgets, and be comfortable talking to them. I think probably one of the main things is, have you seen any of their work that you like the look of, the style of it? And then if you're interested in sustainability, energy efficiency, designing and building something that's going to be healthy to live in and healthy for the planet, which everybody should be interested in, but if that's important to you, then you really need to look at the performance of some of the buildings. Because a lot of the time, even noted architects, award-winning architects, it's all about what looks good in the photos and the glossy magazines. And the performance, I think brands have researched a lot of homes with their housing quality study that they do every 3 or 4 years. And even the large, expensive homes sometimes don't perform as well as they could do or should do. So that's not a given. You've really got to look at the credentials, but also the performance of the homes. And I think the best way to do that is to get some information on if they've actually done some monitoring and use, and they've actually gone back and checked how the house is performing, rather than a rating or an accreditation, which is a prediction or a forecast of what it's going to perform like. So the proof is in the pudding, and I think good architects should be actually going back and analysing what they've done and seeing how they perform.
How many people actually do that, Bob?
Not many.
I'm a big fan of monitoring with sensors to see what's going on. It's really fascinating to actually see what is going on day to day with the external weather conditions and internal conditions in your house. It really brings a huge awareness, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think even some practices that are doing quite large work, I'm sure some of them are monitoring it and some of them are doing really good work. But, if you're spending a lot of money, it pays to check that it's actually going to perform, or actually does perform in reality.
Yeah. I'm actually working on a really interesting project in Raglan at the moment where the homeowner is installing about 60 different sensors, and right from underground, because he's got a ground source heat pump, right through to air movement in the wall cavity, in the roof cavity. So it's going to be quite fantastic and interesting to actually see what the results of that are.
Brands are doing their HEAP 2 study, and we've given them about 30 homes to include in that. I'm not sure if all of them, the owners have agreed, but quite a few of them have. Probably in a year's time, we'll have the data on those homes. Their idea was they wanted to research both high-performance homes and code minimum homes so that they can compare the differences.
Now, Bob, obviously the Christchurch earthquake must have been a crazy and scary time for you. How did you deal with that?
How long have you got? Yeah, no, I'm actually at home at the moment. I'm not in the office. I'm sitting in the house that I was in at the time of the earthquake, and I'm looking out at the city. And that day, I can remember feeling quite sick because I just saw a big cloud of dust over the city, and I thought there's going to be some dead people there. But ironically, my own home was probably one of the most damaged. We didn't lose any homes out of the homes that we've designed for clients because we're at the top of the hill. We're kind of close to the epicenter, and it was pretty violent. This house had pretty significant damage. So we had to move out of our home. So, that's the main thing that's led me to do the Superhome Movement. We moved out of this near new, warm, dry, healthy home, and we got to experience substandard rentals down in the swamp in St Albans. And we had 2 dogs, so we were kind of going to the bottom of the list in terms of finding a rental. So we ended up in a house that seemed fine in the summer, but in the winter it had a real problem with rising damp, mould, and the health of my 2 very small boys deteriorated rapidly. One of them particularly developed serious issues, asthma. And the medical professionals attributed it to the home. So, yeah, we were out of our home for 10 years. So it took 9 years to get the insurance paid. not because we were arguing about it, but just because they thought they could leave us to last because we had a big, expensive, complicated home. They just lawyered up and ignored us, which that became a sort of a decade of a real life challenge. And then it took about 1.5 years to repair the home. And then we've been back in almost 3 years now. Yeah, so the insurance money that we got wasn't enough to repair the home properly, even to current structural standards. So we were pretty adamant that we were going to do that because if there's another earthquake, we don't want to have the same experience. And we also took the opportunity to do a super reno. So we did a lot of things. We put in the windows that needed replacing. We replaced with triple glazed windows. Not all the windows needed replacing, but the major ones did. Yeah, we did a lot of external insulation. It had a membrane roof, a butanol roof with ply, so we installed a warm roof over the top of that. So we put 90 mil of PIR foam and another membrane. The roof was fine. So the roof probably was the thing that saved the house because the whole roof was plywood. So it was really strong and it was still perfectly weather-tight, but we did that because we wanted to improve the thermal performance. So, yeah, a lot of things, we tried to make it as airtight as we could, even though that was tricky with an complicated existing home. We did quite well. It transformed the home. So the power bill ended up being half what it used to be and just a really even temperature the whole time. So that was quite successful. And we learnt a lot by doing that.
What is your wall built up there?
There's a combination, because it's on a hill, it's on 3 levels. The lower level's concrete block. So we put 80 mils of PIR foam and a concrete look plaster finish over that. So that made a huge difference. Yeah, so in the sort of 13 years, or probably 15 years actually, because the house was 3 years old at the time, we've learnt a lot and we've changed the way we're doing things. So it used to be that you do concrete block and then try and insulate on the inside, which is not effective. And by putting the insulation on the outside, it really transformed the home. So basically one level was concrete block, and then there was a concrete floor, unispan precast concrete floor, almost like sort of commercial construction really, and quite a lot of steel. And additional steel went in for earthquake strengthening. And then pretty much above that level is 2 levels. It's on 3 levels. The next 2 levels, a timber frame, a little bit of structural steel, but all of it we've managed to keep within the thermal envelope. So that's not causing any issues, and we've been careful to get insulation wherever we could. And then those timber frame walls we thickened in a number of ways, but sometimes strapping the internal side and putting additional insulation in. In some cases, we did that to fit in air ducts for ventilation. And then there was a wall where there was a stone veneer on the outside. It had a big, heavy Hinawera stone, big 600 by 300 blocks of stone on the outside of the wall, just a timber frame wall. We thought that's not going to be what we put back, because mass is not your friend in an earthquake. And we wanted it to be as earthquake friendly as possible. So we ended up basically using the existing stud cavity, the structural wall, as our services cavity, and then packing it out with 140 mil on the outside. And then we used a travertine stone look tile. So it looked the same, looked like a stone wall. It was just basically a big thick wall full of insulation. In there, in between, we had a layer of plywood, which we used as our air tightness layer. And so that's probably the best wall in the house because of the sort of shape of it and the various different materials and claddings. There's a few different construction types. But yeah, all in all, it was pretty successful.
Awesome. You mentioned the Superhome. So tell us about what inspired you and how you actually went around setting up the Superhome movement.
I guess, like I mentioned, the experience with the earthquakes and seeing how pretty much half the population live in substandard homes just made me think this is not okay. We need to do something about this. Yeah, so, we'd experimented with Homestar a little bit and Actually, when Homestar came along in 2010, we put the homes that we're designing into it, and we're already 7 stars. So we did the first 7-star home. And then we did the first 10-star home in Addington in Church Square in Christchurch. And that was really the first superhome. So that was superhome number 1. And we actually did 2. And we kept the 2-story house as our office and show home, which was open to the public. And then we sold the single-story house, which was next door. And it sold for 29% more than other homes. So it kind of proved to us that if you do a better job and do a super home, it's worth more. It's going to sell for more.
How did you convey that across to the prospective homeowners so that they understood the benefits?
I think the main thing was those homes were the start of the super home tours too. So people could actually visit a handful of homes, and in the end, later years, it ended up being 10 or 12 homes in Christchurch, and then 20 homes dotted around the country in different regions. So it grew to quite a big event, and bigger in Christchurch because that's where we're based and that's where we started. And it sort of became kind of a Christchurch institution, really. People look forward to the super home tours. And I think that was important because people could visit a home, and we'd purposely do it in a cold winter month so they can experience a warm, healthy home and a well-designed home, and ask questions like, what's the power bill? How much did it cost to build this? The designer, the builder, sometimes the owner would be there, and other people involved in the project. So, and people were always very generous in sharing their experience and their ideas. And that, I think, was a key thing, because most people decide what sort of home they're going to build after visiting a show home, over 80% actually. And until then, people were visiting show homes designed by group home building companies in subdivisions. And in terms of their performance, as you'll know, they're pretty much the same.
Yeah.
They might have a different colour benchtop or different materials, but they're pretty much built to the minimum code standard, which is really the problem that we're trying to address with the Superhome Movement. If we had a decent building code, we wouldn't need a Superhome Movement. But because the building code is so subpar and there's a real lack of innovation, a lack of awareness about the need to do better, that's why we thought we need to do something, and we created the Superhome Movement.
Great. So what are the core elements of a superhome, Bob?
There's 10 principles that I think, and some of them are interrelated, and I think it really starts with design. And, good design is about not just performance, but it's about aesthetics, and is it functional, is it beautiful? A really good place to start with design is just designing spaces that you use every day and design for what you need rather than having a house that's too big. If you can achieve that, and keeping it simple, the KISS principle, keep it super simple. So really save on the materials and the site in terms of having a more efficient size. And also inherently you're going to have less ongoing costs, running costs and maintenance costs. If you've got a slightly smaller footprint, and it's going to be better for the planet because you're using less embodied carbon. So that's a really good starting point. What you save in being more efficient and being more spatially aware, you can put into better quality and thicker walls or better windows or a ventilation system, whatever it might be. And making it site-specific and orientated correctly for the sun. I mean, it sounds pretty common sense, but sometimes common sense is not common. A lot of the time I see even new homes not optimised for the best sunlight, and basically slaves to fashion, facing the street, or even sometimes the view. It might be that that's a challenge too. There's a nice view to the southern side. You'd be a fool not to take advantage of that, but there's ways around it. You just need to make sure that you have exceptionally high-performing windows and be sensible about the size, proportions, and location of the windows. So, yeah, it starts with design, but really design filters through all of the other things, like better floors, walls, roofs, I talk about windows a lot because half your heat usually is lost out of the windows. So if you can do a better job of the windows, that's a good place to invest more money. It does cost more. Ventilation and airtightness is really, those two things go hand in hand. If you're going to try and achieve a more airtight home, it's essential to have ventilation. Yeah, and then materials, just using as much as possible low carbon materials, responsibly sourced materials, things that can be recycled and natural materials. Obviously, that's sort of intrinsically linked to the embodied carbon. If you're using less, wasting less, that's got to be good. And you're also paying for it in the first place. So everything you throw out, you have purchased. So if you can design out waste in the beginning and then use natural materials and things that are easily recyclable, half of the waste to landfill reportedly comes from construction, which is huge. And in our experience, the large majority of it is unnecessary. So it's a really easy thing to do to reduce the waste, just by thinking about the materials and how the building's designed in the first place, prefabrication, things like that.
Now, I see you've got 3 different levels in a super home. What can people expect from your different levels?
Yeah, so everybody's on a budget. The base level is really what we think is the sort of minimum standard, minimum healthy home, or it should really be building code. So what we're trying to do is give people a starting point which is really affordable, really accessible. And then from there, better or best is just going up to the next level. So, and we've created a Superhome certification guide, which really is a guide. So it's basically one piece of paper, double-sided, so 2 pages, gives people all of the key things to think about in terms of the base, better, best levels. Airtightness, for example, it's 3, 2, 1, base, better, best, 1 being the best. And different levels of energy required per square metre. Those are targets and it's really guidance. And with the certification of super homes, the verification is after 12 months in use, monitoring. So like we were talking about earlier, the proof is in the pudding. So you either achieve those targeted specifications or you prove via monitoring the performance of the home. So existing homes can be certified as super homes without the need to go into energy modelling or blower door testing, just by verifying the actual performance. And it's $200 for a sensor rather than maybe a couple of $1,000 to do the modelling and a few $100 to do the air test. Although anyone starting on a new home, if they want to be assured of performance, they should still be doing those things, unless they're confident that their architect is experienced enough and on top of that, it's always good to check, if you're spending $1 million on a home or even $500,000, a few $100 to check the performance or model the performance at the design stage is really important.
Many people might have heard that the building code has been recently updated to meet the new H1 standards. What would you comment about those changes and what's been done and perhaps what's been left out of those?
No comment. I think my mother once said, if you haven't got anything good to say, don't say anything at all. Yeah, honestly, the recent H1 changes, energy efficient changes for the building code, it had no effect on what we do and probably most super home participant designers, architects, builders, because we're already doing better than that. But I think for the mainstream industry, the 90-95% that build to code, it's an important first step. And it is just the very first step, baby steps on the bottom rung of the ladder towards where we need to go. So my view on that is it's too little too late. And there's still a massive journey. And, Building for Climate Change, the MB Building for Climate Change program sets out a target roadmap for that. But I have no doubt that those targets won't be met because we're so slowly starting, and there's been such resistance to even these small changes at the beginning. So as long as the building code is lagging, we need to create awareness, and we need things like the Superhome Movement.
So, Bob, I think your Superhome tours in Christchurch have been a fantastic way for people to actually get in and experience what a home feels like on those colder months, where they can walk into a home and actually discuss the energy usage and feel the comfort of the home. Do you have any plans to extend that anywhere else in the country?
We have spread our fingers around the country to a degree. So we've got sort of a handful of participants in Auckland, which is the biggest market in the country. There's some good designers. We need more. We need more builders to get on board. I think builders are really important, as well as architects and designers, because a lot of the time the design is absent. And what we've observed is public, a lot of the time they feel more comfortable talking to a builder. So there's a real role for builders to, as long as they know about this stuff, educate their customers as well as the designers. A lot of them do. A lot of builders and even architects know we should be doing better. But the stumbling block I see is a lot of the time they don't talk about better performing homes because they assume the client's on a tight budget and they want to spend the money on the bling, the things they can see. So a window's a window, whether it has 2 panes or 3, a wall's a wall, no matter how thick it is, it still looks the same. So people tend to focus on those visual things, and a lot of the time thinking about how cheaply can I build and thinking about flicking it soon after building it and getting their foot on the property ladder. Whereas other parts of the planet, people think about building a forever home, a home for life, and one that they can even hand down to the next generation. In New Zealand, on average, homes are sold 5 to 7 years after they're built. But most of Bob Burnett architecture clients, they want to build a home, they're going to be carried out in a box, a lot of them tell me. And the rare occasion I've seen a home that we've designed sold, it's because they're moving to another region or their circumstances have changed where they need to be in a different location, rather than selling a house and just moving to another house. Because why would you sell a warm house with a small power bill and move to a house that's colder and got a bigger power bill?
Exactly. Oh, awesome, Bob. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Was there anything else you wanted to say before we wrap things up?
Just a shameless plug for the Superhome Movement. It is important for the community, for the homeowners, but it's also a good way that professionals can get some knowledge and learn about the important things and even how to communicate with their clients about the need to do better. So good way to get involved is just to become a participant. If you're a designer or a builder or a supplier, we try and make things as cheap as possible, if not free. So for the public, most things are free. For participants, it's $500 a year subscription for an architect or designer or a builder.
Fantastic. I'll be leaving a link to the Superhome website in the show notes of this podcast. So if anyone's keen to learn more about Superhomes, they can just click on the link and learn more from you, Bob.
Awesome. Thanks, Simon. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Sharing knowledge is at the heart of our strategy to make buildings better for everyone. Sign up for our podcasts to learn more about creating healthy living conditions by protecting building structures from external and internal moisture damage. Thanks for listening. Looking forward to having you with us next time.